and thank you for joining us for the Drive Green Ottawa speaker series with Debbie Scharf, Director General of the Clean Fuels Branch at Natural Resources Canada. For those of you who don't already know us, EnviroCentre is a non-profit environmental organization based here in Ottawa. Our core mission supports sustainable lifestyles, which means that we encourage people to take action on climate in their own lives, in their homes, in their workplaces, their businesses, their communities, and right here in our city. Our work focuses on 4 key areas: green homes, green transportation, green business, and green lifestyle. And today, of course, we're here to talk about green transportation in Ottawa, and specifically zero emissions, low carbon transportation. But before we get started, we have just a few logistical notes. First, please note that this session is being recorded and will be shared online after the event. Second, please keep yourself muted during the presentation so that everyone is able to hear Debbie speaking. And third, we will be monitoring questions in the chat box, so please type them there and we will bring them forward to Debbie for a Q&A period following the presentation. Our speaker today is Debbie Scharf. As Director General of Natural Resources Canada's Clean Fuel Branch, Debbie Scharf is responsible for advancing the production and use of low carbon fuels in Canada. In addition to providing strategic advice on domestic and international low carbon fuel matters, her team delivers low carbon fuels programs in transportation and industry sectors to help mitigate climate change, advance the competitiveness of Canada's energy sector, and promote access to reliable, clean, and affordable energy for all Canadians. Prior to her current position, Ms. Scharf served as a Senior Director in Strategic Energy Policy and Director for the Office of Energy Efficiency at NRCan. She also has held several positions at Environment and Climate Change Canada, advancing chemicals management, clean air, and climate change files. Debbie holds a Bachelor of Commerce from McGill University and a master's degree in resource and environmental management from Simon Fraser University. So once again, welcome to everyone in our audience. And Debbie, take it away. You have the digital floor.
Great. So can you hear me? Great. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Sharon, for that very kind introduction. I'm glad to be here today to talk about the Government of Canada's ongoing effort to decarbonize the transportation sector as part of our efforts to tackle climate change. I want to start by commending the EnviroCentre, the City of Ottawa, and their partners for organizing this Drive Green Ottawa Week to celebrate zero emission vehicles and engage the public on this topic. This is an area where I truly feel we can all play a role. And because of that, I'm grateful to be able to connect with everyone here, albeit virtually, and for myself, actually from one of the bedrooms in my home, as we all focus on staying safe and healthy. So for today, I'd like to talk about 4 different themes. The first one is, why is the decarbonization of transportation so important? And then, what targets does the federal government or has the federal government committed to? And what have we been doing to support these targets? And finally, what more do we need to do as we look to the future? So let me start by talking a little bit about why is it so important to decarbonize the transportation sector? Well, the efficient movement of goods and people is an essential part of a strong economy. Transportation is a source of jobs. It helps to get the products to where they need to go. It brings you to work. It even delivers Amazon packages, which has been a big flavor in my own home for the last number of months. But this activity is expected to triple by 2050. And as a result, associated emissions are forecasted to increase substantially. And we know that this will compound our climate and health impacts. Now, some of you may know this already, but our transportation sector is the second largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in Canada. In fact, it makes up 25% of Canada's total GHG emissions. And light-duty vehicles and light-duty emissions from the cars that we drive every day are on the rise again because we, Canadians, are buying more SUVs and pickup trucks than before. And over the next decade, emissions from commercial freight are expected to rise even more substantially. And this is due to the growing demand for online shopping, for one-day delivery, but as well as our naturally growing population and our growing economy. And it's not just greenhouse gas emissions that are harmful to the environment. It's smog, it's air contamination, it's traffic, it's noise pollution, and so much more that takes a toll on our health and well-being. That is, unless we all take action. And the government has set ambitious targets to try and change this trajectory. So what are these ambitious targets? Well, first, the government has announced its target to reach net zero emissions by 2050. And this was reaffirmed by the Governor General during her recent speech from the throne that just took place the other week. The government is also committed in the shorter term to meeting and exceeding our 2030 climate targets. And for that reason, removing carbon emissions from transportation is imperative. And we know this can be done via large-scale electrification, by way of battery electric vehicles, plug-in hybrids, and fuel cell electric vehicles. It also could be done by using more low-carbon fuels like bioethanol. In addition to this, the government is also committed to achieve its zero-emission vehicle targets, reaching 100% of light-duty vehicle or passenger car sales by 2040. And the momentum for these types of targets are growing around the world. In fact, Canada is among a group of countries moving in this direction. For example, California just announced that it will ban the sale of internal combustion engine vehicles, gasoline and diesel powered cars by 2035. And the UK's ban on the sale of these vehicles will come even earlier in 2030. Well, you know, it's nice to set targets, but as you can appreciate, they don't mean a whole lot unless we've got concrete actions behind it. So I wanted to touch on a few things the Government of Canada has been doing to support these targets. So we know there are barriers to greater uptake of zero-emission vehicles, things like range anxiety, affordability, familiarity with the ever-evolving technology, to name a few. And we've been making targeted investments to address these challenges. And I want to give you a few concrete examples. The Government of Canada is investing over $300 million in infrastructure, zero-emission and alternative fuel infrastructure to address range anxiety. We actually have two programs. The first one, to establish a coast-to-coast-to-coast network of 1,000 electric vehicle fast chargers, and another, to put in place up to 20,000 chargers where Canadians live, work, and play. These same programs are also helping to establish natural gas refueling along Canada's key freight corridors and hydrogen refueling stations in key metropolitan areas. Right now, as of right now, we have projects in place for more than 800 fast chargers along the highway. And the first round of investments from our newest program generated a tremendous amount of interest, dozens of projects from across Canada that will result in more than 2,600 additional chargers. As a citizen, an employee, a parent, you need the confidence to know you can get from point A to point B, to go from Ottawa to Montreal or from Canada to the United States, and know that when you get there, the charger you find is the same as the one you would use at home. And that is why Natural Resources Canada is working with provinces and territories and with the United States to develop codes and standards so that Canadians and visitors can safely and reliably use charging and refueling equipment wherever they are in North America. And Arcan is also supporting innovation and the demonstration of the next generation of charging and refueling technologies, because we know the technologies of today are only going to get better. And let me give you an example. We're investing in a technology that will allow you to charge your car wirelessly, or to use your electric vehicle as a battery on wheels to run the lights in our home or cottages during a power outage. I'm pretty excited about those possibilities, where one day EVs can bring more flexibility to the electricity system and give Canadians more and better options to charge their cars. Another program that Natural Resources Canada has launched is called our Zero Emission Vehicle Awareness Initiative. And this really is exactly what it says, helping to increase awareness of ZEVs. And we're funding projects across the country as well. Some of those most recent projects include translating ZEV awareness guides into different languages so they're accessible to all Canadians, and funding interactive information panels next to charging stations. I'm sure many of you already know about the new federal purchase incentive of up to $5,000, with its goal to make these cars more affordable and encourage more Canadians to buy ZEVs. Finally, if you're a business, zero emission vehicles, including medium duty ones, are eligible for a full tax write-off in the year they are put to use. This will encourage businesses to convert to zero emission fleets and leave them more money that can be invested in other productive ways. Now, while the Government of Canada is an important player in this space, we are not the only player, and I'm a firm believer, and evidence shows that progress cannot be made without partnerships. And the programming that we offer, everything that I just spoke about, in fact, depends on successful partnerships, from utilities and charging network providers to automakers, industry, and academia. In the last year alone, the government has partnered with dozens of organizations, including companies like Suncor, utilities like the Ontario Power Generation, and private sector companies like Canadian Tire on infrastructure deployment. I also want to recognize there's tremendous leadership at the provincial and territorial level, as well as at the municipal level, who have been great partners and collaborators with us. Leading municipalities like Ottawa are not only some of our key project partners, but their own policies and programs are so important and really a testament, I think, to the leadership role municipalities can play in Canada. I would like to congratulate the City of Ottawa for their commitment to switch from gas and diesel vehicles to electric ones, as the city moves to execute plans to reduce GHG emissions by 100% by 2050. I was also pretty excited to hear about Ottawa's decision to install 24 new on-street chargers across town, together with the commitment to increase active transportation, an electric scooter pilot, and the purchase of electric SUVs for the city fleet. And lastly, utilities like Hydro Ottawa and a long list of not-for-profit organizations, including Plug and Drive, the Electric Vehicle Council of Ottawa, and the EnviroCentre, with their own innovative ideas, programs, projects, and passions. And that's why I feel confident that we can get to the goals that we've set. So given this, what more do we need to do? Well, I can say the Government of Canada has put in place a number of what I like to call complementary measures, like pollution pricing and more stringent vehicle emission standards. We're also working on new regulations that will reduce the amount of carbon in the fuels we use every day. And these measures will help drive the adoption of ZEVs. So our existing actions have set us on a path toward our targets, but we need to do more to reach those goals. And that's why the Government of Canada's recent speech from the throne did reinforce our commitment to take more action to make zero emission vehicles more affordable and to invest in more charging stations across the country. So, when I reflect on the challenge of decarbonizing the transportation sector, this is sort of what I've come to understand, is there really is no one size fits all solution. We need to push electrification. We also need to increase the use of low carbon fuels like biofuels, renewable natural gas, where going electric may not be the most viable or may not be the most feasible option for the time being at least. And we have to take an all-in approach. We need to have a mindset of looking for the mix of actions that makes the most sense for our cars, for our trucks, not to mention for our planes, our trains, and our boats one day. And this is true not only for transportation, but for other industrial sectors where reducing emissions is going to be challenging. And to me, this is the path to success. So I hope that these few remarks have been informative for you. And I do thank you for the time and for the invitation to be here. And I'm very happy to take some questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Debbie. That was very informative. So I noticed that we do have a number of questions in the chat. Darren, do you have questions lined up already to ask, or should I go ahead with a couple of questions?
Sharon, you can start with your questions first.
Okay, sounds good. So you've talked about increasing electric vehicle adoption and some of the initiatives the federal government is taking on. In your view, what would you say are some of the key obstacles to electrification that we're facing? Some of the things that are preventing people from moving to electric vehicles at this time?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned some of them when I chatted, and range anxiety, price. Those are really the first two that come to my mind. And I spoke a bit about some of the things we're doing about those. But what I will say is, like, the one area that I really believe we can do a lot more in is around the awareness, the education and training. And what I will say about obstacles is the first thing, you have to know what they are, and then you have to sort of have a number of measures that address them. But the awareness is something that I feel is often not given enough attention, because buying a vehicle is a big deal for Canadians, me included. I'm actually trying to buy a new car right now. And what I can say is there's a number of surveys from organizations like Clean Energy Canada and others that show really that a significant part of the population still lack a basic understanding and have very limited exposure to ZEVs. And we need to do more to change this. So, the Zero Emission Vehicles Initiative, the Vehicle Awareness Initiative is one way that supports projects to do that across the country. This webinar, in fact, I really think is an amazing way to do that as well. And I think the message is, from my perspective, that ZEVs can fit into the lifestyle of most Canadians. And it's not most Canadians 10 years from now, but it's most Canadians right now. And so being able to focus on that awareness, getting people comfortable with understanding the technology, how it may be the same or different from what they're used to and what their choices are, is, I think, a very important obstacle to tackle.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we've seen this week in all of our different sessions, we've really learned a lot about electric vehicles today and how many of the obstacles that people think they would face in moving to an electric vehicle really are not a concern anymore. It's been really interesting. And so obviously at EnviroCentre, we share that view that awareness and learning is really, really important. And so just a quick plug, if anybody has missed some of our previous sessions, I do encourage you to find, because there's a lot of answers to some of the standard questions in those earlier sessions. Yeah, and awareness is very, very important. So I have another question. This one is a little bit bigger. When you look at all the different ways that the federal government is looking at and other organizations are looking at to reduce emissions from transportation, what do you think you would highlight as the biggest possible growth area at this time? Where do you see a lot of potential?
Yeah. So, I know we've been talking a lot about the kind of cars that we drive every day in this particular discussion, but what I would like to touch upon to answer that question is the freight sector. Because the freight sector is one area that's expected to grow substantially. I alluded to it very briefly in my remarks. But this, I would say this is one of the greatest opportunity areas and one that we have not spent a lot of time and effort on in the past. Luckily for Canada, we do tend to punch above our weight when it comes to this space. We actually in Canada manufacture zero and low emitting trucks and buses, and we've got a number of companies that do that, like Lion, Nova, New Flyer. Some of these names may be familiar to some of the folks in the audience. And there's a lot of potential to significantly reduce emissions by switching the types of powertrains that these trucks and buses use, including with hydrogen fuel cells. And we're starting to see these deployments more and more across the country. I'm going to give you an example that's incredibly recent. I was very pleased to learn Walmart just announced that it's going to order 130 electric trucks as part of its commitment to have a fully alternative powered fleet by 2028. And we actually have a whole range of programs that NRCan delivers to the freight industry. And we've actually been doing this for many years, albeit on a bit of a smaller scale, focused on reducing emissions, reducing fuel consumption, so energy efficiency, and ultimately reducing costs for these companies, which of course can make them more profitable. So there's a couple of things that we do that we'd like to build upon. So we do things like benchmarking and training how truckers actually drive to be more fuel efficient. And then we can support these companies to undertake fleet assessments. And based on those fleet assessments, either to help them retrofit their existing trucks or fuel switch to zero and low carbon powered vehicles. So there's a lot of potential in this segment, but it is trailing a little bit further behind passenger cars. But really, I think this is the place where there's more effort required. And I think more companies are absolutely coming around to this.
Yeah, that's a huge area. I think we could talk for hours about that, but we won't because we do have some other questions. Darren, do you want to take it away with the questions from the chat?
Sure. Our first one is, how is the government showing leadership? What is the government doing to reduce emissions from its own fleet?
That's an excellent question. Because leading by example is a pretty important concept and one that we do take very seriously. And we do, in fact, at the federal level, have an entire program called Greening Government Operations so that we can lead by example. And this programming extends to transportation. It also extends to our buildings. But from a transportation perspective, it really looks at modernizing our fleet to meet the objective we've set for ourselves, that our own administrative fleets should be at least 80% ZEV by 2030. So we actually, at NRCan, we're fortunate enough to actually lead this piece of the puzzle for the federal government. And we've been working on different practices and tools to actually help the folks in government make choices, good vehicle choices, when we're purchasing the cars that make up our administrative fleet. And I love this one example because I love innovative ideas, but I'm not an engineer or a techie in my own background. But we actually have these data loggers that you can install in vehicles, and it tracks your driving habits. And then based on that, it makes a recommendation about what is the best type of vehicle that meets your needs, given your driving habits. And we have actually done assessments using these data loggers in 12 out of the 15 largest government fleets, from Environment Canada to the Department of Defense to Parks Canada. And based on that, we're now making recommendations that directly inform the buying choices that these departments are making. The other thing that I will say is we do, we have a bit of a domestic audience here about, living and working and playing here in Ottawa. We do a lot of things internationally, and our reputation internationally is also important in demonstrating leadership with other countries. And we were in fact the first country very recently to take the commercial Drive to Zero pledge. And this is an international initiative. It's on freight. But to accelerate zero emission freight trucks. And it's in line with what I said before around really trying to turn the attention and the emphasis, not that we should stop what we're doing with passenger vehicles, but to really expand that emphasis into the freight and trucking industry. And we joined this initiative to really try and elevate the profile internationally. And now we're actively trying to challenge other countries to join this great campaign. And it's part of an initiative we are co-leading called the International Electric Vehicle Initiative. So we do work at home, we do work in our own house, and we do work internationally to demonstrate our leadership and to actually take action. To proof is in the pudding, to show that leadership.
Okay, great. Darren, we have another question from the chat.
Yeah, that's right. The next question is, what about the lesser known impact of ZEVs? What is your take on that? And what advantage does Canada have in lowering the footprint of ZEVs?
Yeah. So, I've heard a lot of people talk about carbon emissions to actually make EV batteries. And I think that's probably suffered from a bit of controversy. What I can say is Canada does have a bit of an advantage in that regard. We are actually the home of quite a number of critical metals and minerals that are used to make batteries. These are things like nickel and cobalt. And that is a bit of an advantage for us and a way to even grow new clean energy industries. And in addition to that, it's one thing to have those minerals and metals, but are you actually extracting them sustainably? And we do foster our sustainable mining practices, and it's a trend we're reinforcing as part of green mining initiatives. So one, we have this natural advantage of having these minerals and metals. We want to extract them in a sustainable way. And so that's a really good advantage for Canada. But what I can say is, just on the issue of the lesser known impacts or carbon impacts of ZEVs, battery manufacturing, it can emit more emissions compared to internal combustion engines. But typically that is offset within the first few months of driving an EV. And in Canada in particular, we can say that because over 80% of the electricity in this country comes from non-emitting sources. So, the electricity that's being made to charge our batteries is coming from clean sources. And the Government of Canada, sort of part of some other programming we have, is supporting provinces to actually increase that share of renewables even more so that we can get that 80% to 90%. And I hope one day in the future, even higher than that. And so in that way, there's a bit of an offsetting of some of these other known impacts.
Okay. All right. Oh, okay. Looks like we do have another question. Darren,
Yep.
Do you have one that you're ready to ask?
Yes, I do. So I have two. The first one is, if I wanted to, can I drive across the country in an EV now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it takes a bit of planning. but it is possible. That's the short answer. We are nearing the completion of the coast-to-coast network. We're not quite there, but we're pretty close. But I do want to say, I mean, I've spoken about our federally supported stations, but we're not the only game in town. There are many other organizations, and in particular private companies, that are funding EV chargers as well. And they're being added literally monthly. So what I will say is, and I'm happy to share the link, we at NRCan do host a site, which is an EV and alternative fuel locator map. And so this shows which stations are opened and planned across Canada and even the United States. You could search there too. And it allows you to map out a route. So, you know, maybe you want to go across Canada, or maybe you want to just go across your province, but this type of map can actually help show you how you can charge your car along the way. So I would say it takes a bit of planning, but absolutely it can be done.
All right, Darren, is there one more question?
Yep, there's one more. Will the government be offering future incentives for EVSE installation? There is an existing EVSE equipment rebate, but myself and other EV owners have yet to find a qualified retailer who can offer the rebate.
EVSE?
Yes, that's right.
What does the SE stand for?
That was not... let's see. EV charger, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan.
So, I mean, the federal programs are and there's a number of different approaches that we're tackling to it, but we'll typically target either municipalities or private sector companies or third-party delivery agents to install that. So at this point, the federal program is really in that space.
Okay. Darren, are there any more questions lined up in the chat?
Nothing else at the moment.
Okay, so I just wanted to ask one question as we see if some of the others get through. You mentioned that the federal government has some other initiatives possibly coming up, and I'm sure you know lots of knowledge about that you can't share with us, but is there anything about future EV adoption initiatives that are coming down the pipeline that you would be able to talk about a little bit?
So maybe what I can say is, you know, just referring back to the speech from the throne, there was a direct mention of infrastructure and uptake of EVs. And I think that that's a fairly strong signal about the government's commitment in this space to do more in this space. So while I'll say two things. One, there's programming that's not done yet. So, you know, like the infrastructure program still has a number of years to go. So there'll be more rollout. The incentive program still exists. So these programs still exist. But I think that what you heard in the speech from the throne was a signal that there is more to be done in those areas. And those sort of translate into the future, into the types of things that you may see coming out of the government in terms of future programming. So that's probably as far as I could take it. But you know, it's included there because it's seen as a priority and a signal of the direction the government wants to go.
Okay, excellent. Darren, I think there's another one that's come through the chat. Is that right?
That's right. We got one. Can I drive an EV in the winter?
Ooh, can I drive it? That's it's a very Canadian question, eh? In the Office of Energy Efficiency, I did a lot on heating and cooling, so we thought about the winter a lot. Great question. So battery capacity and output could be reduced in extreme temperatures and reduce your range somewhat. Not a lot, but somewhat. But what I will say is, with some careful planning and a full battery to start, EVs can handle 99% of your trips, even in the winter. And there's a bit of a bonus. Many EVs can heat your cabin automatically before getting into your car. And electric vehicles can have equal or better traction in slippery and snowy conditions. So definitely extreme cold temperatures is always something to consider in the context of the technologies that we use, but it is certainly not a major challenge in this particular case.
Okay, all right. Darren, do we have any more questions in there?
We do have more. Are there mandatory future targets that car manufacturers must meet in terms of percentage of sales that must be ZEVs?
Currently, there's not that in Canada. We do have our target for where we'd like to see EV sales to go, as I mentioned earlier, 40%. But at this point in time, there isn't anything mandatory in place, not at the federal level.
Okay, next question, Darren.
That's all so far at the moment. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know what? Actually, that's good timing because I know Debbie's time is very limited today. So I think unfortunately, I know we haven't got to all of the questions yet. If your question was not answered, we will collect those questions and forward them along afterwards to be answered directly. So for now, unfortunately, we do need to wind up the session a little bit early today. So thank you very much, Debbie, for joining us and sharing all of your insights. And thanks as well to all of our attendees who took the time to join us today, and also in all of this week's many events. This event actually winds up our formal Drive Green Ottawa session, but I would encourage you all to check out our Drive Green Bingo if you haven't already for some family fun around EVs. And I also want to remind you all that today is the opening day for Plug and Drive's new mobile EV education trailer out at IKEA. The trailer will be running from now until December, so you can visit their site online to sign up to do a test drive of an EV and learn all you could ever want to know about EVs and possibly more, 100% sales free. So it's really a great opportunity. I would encourage you to check that out. And if you missed any of our events this week, good news. We are assembling all of the content of this week for the full week to post it to a freely accessible course format on our mygreenlifestyle.ca site. So when it's up and ready to go, you can visit to check out the tips, the speakers, and the articles that were shared throughout this week in a simple daily lesson format. And you can share it with your friends and spread the word about EVs. So stay tuned for that. And of course, if you want to follow our doings here at EnviroCentre, please just sign up for our weekly Green Lifestyle Digest, the Green Beat, and stay in touch. Links to all of these wonderful things are in the chat, so don't leave before you have a chance to check that out. Drive Green Ottawa this week was presented by EnviroCentre in partnership with the City of Ottawa. Special thanks to Hydro Ottawa, EVCO, and Plug and Drive, who supported all of these events. So again, thank you, Debbie, and thank you everyone for attending this event, and have a wonderful week.
Thank you.